We thought we were doing everything right, saving money to take care of our elderly parents. But when my mother broke her hip, we discovered that the emergency fund no longer existed. The money that was supposed to save our mother's life had become my brother's failed investment. And the worst part? He swore he did it out of love for his family. At that moment, I had to choose, protecting my parents or protecting the brother who destroyed our trust. And what came next? It wasn't just a family feud. It was a war for justice and love. It was a warm afternoon when Carla arrived at her parents' house with a briefcase in her hands and her heart full of plans. Her mother, always smiling, was making coffee, while her father read the newspaper on the porch. Pedro arrived shortly after, with his usual hurried air, talking on his cell phone about an unmissable investment. Even so, he hung up the phone and sat down at the table, curious. Carla explained the idea: to create an emergency fund, a family savings account for when her parents needed it. Pedro laughed at first, calling it an emotional retirement plan, but he soon became interested. "That's a good idea, sis. We need to think about their future," he said, with a tone that mixed sincerity and lightness. The parents exchanged emotional glances. For them, that gesture meant more than money. It was love in the form of care. Carla opened the notebook and began to write down the details: amounts, deposit dates, and a commitment signed by both siblings. In the following days, Carla went to the bank and opened the joint account. She carefully kept the first receipt as if it were a symbol of a promise fulfilled. Pedro transferred his share, took a selfie with the receipt, and sent it to the family group chat, full of pride. "See, Mom, we're responsible," he wrote, and everyone laughed. That moment felt like a new beginning, a silent pact of unity and maturity. As the weeks passed, Carla felt genuine joy seeing the balance grow. It was a reminder that even with their differences, she and her brother could work together for a greater purpose. At night, she looked at the statements as if looking at a secure future. Her parents, relieved, began to sleep better, confident that their children were taking care of them. Time, however, was beginning to reveal subtle cracks. Pedro, always full of ideas, talked about investment opportunities, while Carla warned him to stay focused. "Emergency money should not be touched, Pedro," she would say. He agreed, but the restless glint in his eyes made it clear his relationship with risk was different. Family harmony had been sealed, but the real test was yet to come, and no one was prepared for what was approaching. Do you also believe that love for parents is the foundation of everything? Then subscribe to the channel now, because here, each story will remind you that caring for those who raised us is the truest form of love. And if you've ever experienced something similar, this story will deeply affect you. A few months later, Carla realized something wasn't right. The bank statements showed irregular deposits. Pedro had missed 2 consecutive contributions, and no explanation had been given. At first, she tried not to make a fuss. She sent a casual message: "Hey, how are you? I noticed this month's deposit didn't go through. Do you need me to cover it and you can replace it later?" The reply took 2 days. When it arrived, it was a rehearsed excuse. "I had a tight spot, but I'll double it next month."
That night, he called his mother. Her voice was serene, talking about the flowers in the garden and the cake she planned to bake. Carla almost told him, but held back. They don't need this burden right now, she thought. She looked at the bank statement again and felt a chill. Loving a brother could be a kind of blindness, and she feared she was about to lose both sides of her family. It was a Tuesday morning when the phone rang. The news hit like a punch. Her mother had fallen in the bathroom and was being rushed to the hospital. The sound of Carla's heart seemed to echo in the car during the drive. At the emergency room, she found her distraught father and the doctor explaining that the hip fracture would require urgent surgery. The cost? High and immediate. Carla, without hesitation, said that there was an emergency fund precisely for that. She picked up her cell phone, opened the banking app, and froze. The balance was almost zero. For a moment, the air seemed to disappear. She tried to mentally recalculate the numbers, thinking she had made some mistake. There was no mistake. The fund, the symbol of unity, of promise, of security, had vanished. Hours later, she called Pedro. He answered with a tense voice. "Pedro, the fund is gone. Where's the money?" A heavy silence filled the line. I can explain," he said, stammering. "The deal didn't work out, but I'm sorting it out." Carla felt the ground open up beneath her. "Sorting it out? Mom's having surgery tomorrow," she screamed, unable to hold back her tears. She paid for the surgery with her own savings, without telling her parents. She spent the night at the hospital, watching her sleeping mother, the sound of the machines marking the rhythm of her silent anger. In that moment, a part of Carla understood that something inside her had changed forever. When Pedro showed up at the hospital the next day, he brought flowers and a rehearsed expression of concern. "Sis, I know I messed up, but I swear it was for a good cause." She just stared at him, tired. "It wasn't for a good cause, Pedro. It was for you." He tried to smile, but her words dismantled him. For the first time, he realized that forgiveness wouldn't come easily, and that the price of his cleverness was about to come due. The days following the surgery were a mixture of relief and bitterness. Her mother was recovering well, her father spent hours by her side, and Carla managed everything: exams, medications, bills. But one absence screamed: Pedro. Since the argument on the phone, he hadn't called, hadn't shown up, hadn't asked. His silence was deafening, and each passing hour increased the hurt that Carla tried to contain. One night, arriving home exhausted, she found a short message on her cell phone. "I'm sorry for everything. I'll fix it, I promise." Nothing more. No value, no explanation. Just empty promises. As always. Carla deleted the message without replying. For the first time, there was no more room for excuses, only the emptiness left by broken trust.
Carla took a deep breath. She knew her brother's ways. The same charm that convinced investors also made him dangerous with promises. She decided to wait. However, a nagging feeling grew inside her. That fund was her parents' security, not a gambling game. The following week, while visiting her mother, she overheard Pedro talking excitedly on the phone about a new partnership and a guaranteed return. Her heart tightened. That night, Carla didn't sleep. She thought about how to confront Pedro without turning everything into a fight. After all, they had a history of disagreements. She down to earth, he always aiming for the impossible. The love between them had always been strong, but unbalanced. She cared, he took risks. Deep down, she knew that if something went wrong, she would be the one to fix it. Days later, she arranged to meet her brother for coffee. Pedro arrived late with a guilty smile and expensive cologne. "I know what you're going to say," he began before she could speak, "but relax. Everything's under control. I only used part of the money temporarily. A quick investment, guaranteed return. Next week, I'll pay it all back with a profit." Carla remained silent. She felt anger, but also exhaustion. He spoke with such conviction that it was difficult not to believe him, or not to want to believe him. Before saying goodbye, she looked at him firmly. "Pedro, it's not about profit. It's about trust. This account isn't yours. It belongs to our parents."
He looked away and gave a rehearsed smile. "I know, sis. Trust me." Carla didn't answer. She went home with a heavy stomach, feeling that that promise, like so many before, was about to crumble. The following month brought silence. No new deposits went into the joint account, and Pedro avoided answering messages. Carla, who always tried to give him the benefit of the doubt, began tracking the transactions on her own. That's when she noticed something alarming. Transfers on dates and in amounts that didn't make sense. It wasn't just a delay, it was a withdrawal. A considerable portion of the fund had been moved, and she knew exactly who had done it. Over the weekend, Carla decided to confront her brother. She found him in a cafe, excited about a business meeting. "Carla, you won't believe it. I'm about to close a partnership that will triple our capital," he said, gesturing wildly, oblivious to the gravity in her gaze. When she showed him the bank statement, Pedro hesitated. It was just a loan. I was going to tell you. It's temporary, I swear." Carla listened as he explained the plan. A growing restaurant, interested investors, zero risk. But with each word, she saw more of the dreamy boy than the man who promised security. "You used our parents' money, Pedro. What if something goes wrong?" she asked. He replied with that irritating charm. "Nothing will go wrong. Trust me." She wanted to believe, but something broke inside her. When she got home, she opened her computer and wrote everything down in a notebook. Values, dates, promises. It was an attempt to maintain control over a growing chaos. Deep down, Carla knew that the line between trust and naivete was blurring.
2 days later, he showed up at the hospital with a bouquet and a forced smile. "Sis, I know I messed up, but I'm trying to get back on my feet. It was just a stroke of bad luck." Carla took a deep breath, trying not to scream. "Pedro, it wasn't bad luck. It was irresponsibility." He looked away, pretending to be busy with his mother's heart monitor. "You don't understand the business world," he murmured. "No," she replied firmly, "I understand the real world." The parents, oblivious to the depth of the conflict, seemed happy to see the two together. The father even smiled, saying, "It's good to see my children united again." Carla swallowed the words she wanted to say. There was a wound they couldn't see, and she didn't have the courage to expose it yet. That night, alone in the hospital parking lot, Carla cried for the first time. Not just from disappointment, but from realizing she was losing her brother. The same boy who shared toys and secrets was now a stranger, someone she needed to protect, not out of love, but out of fear of what he might still do. Over time, appearances returned to normal, but only superficially. The mother was discharged from the hospital, the father resumed small tasks, and Pedro returned to the house, always with a new speech about financial recovery. Carla watched him in silence, like watching a time bomb about to explode. Every word he spoke sounded rehearsed. Every smile seemed like a disguise. One Sunday during lunch, Pedro made a toast. "To family, which survives everything." Carla held her glass steady, but didn't toast. Her father, confused, tried to appease her. "You need to stop with this atmosphere. Money comes and goes, but family is forever." These words, which had previously brought comfort, now sounded like a sentence. For Carla, that speech was like sweeping dirt under the rug. That night, she went to Pedro's office. "We need to talk, just the two of us." He pretended to be busy, shuffling papers. "I already told you, I'm sorting everything out." Carla crossed her arms. "Liar, I saw your bank statements. You didn't just invest in that restaurant, you paid off personal debts and even credit card debt." He paled. "You hacked into my account?" "I protected our parents' account," she replied firmly. The tension became unbearable. Pedro stood up, his eyes brimming with a mixture of shame and anger. "You don't trust me. You never have. I always wanted to be the saint to the family." Carla looked at him calmly. "No, Pedro. I wanted to be the adult." The silence that followed was devastating. In the following days, the atmosphere at home grew heavy. The father avoided the subject. The mother cried in secret. "We're not going to destroy ourselves over money," she said. But Carla knew it wasn't the money. It was what it revealed. The distance between those who take responsibility and those who run away from it. That night, she turned on her computer and typed a sentence at the top of a new document. "The truth is the only investment that never fails." She saved the file under Pedro's name. It was the beginning of something she never imagined she'd have the courage to do. The beginning of the process.
Pedro, in turn, began a victimhood campaign. He told relatives that Carla wanted to take everything from him. He posted phrases on social media about injustice between siblings. Her lawyer advised her not to respond publicly. "The truth is proven in court, not on social media," he said. And Carla followed the advice, even though her anger burned silently. The process dragged on, and with it, the distance between the two siblings grew into an abyss. With each hearing, the tension increased. With each encounter, Pedro avoided looking at her. On one of those days, while waiting in the courtroom's anteroom, Carla looked at her reflection in the glass and almost didn't recognize herself. She was no longer the patient and conciliatory sister. She was a tired yet determined woman. A woman who had understood that love, without limits, becomes a prison. The first hearing was a shock to everyone. Pedro arrived in a suit, accompanied by an expensive lawyer and an arrogant demeanor that tried to mask his nervousness. Carla, discreet and firm, brought only a briefcase and the silent support of her lawyer. The judge listened to the versions, asked questions, and each of Pedro's answers seemed to dig a deeper hole. "It was a misunderstanding," he said, but the bank statements, messages, and receipts spoke louder. After the session, the news reached the parents. The father paled. "You're taking this to a judge?" he asked, incredulous. Carla tried to explain, but he interrupted her. "Daughter, we weren't raised to resolve things like this. Family comes to an understanding, not a lawsuit." Those words cut deeper than any court sentence. The mother wept, holding Carla's hands. "Don't let this destroy you, my daughter. You only have each other." In the following days, the family atmosphere became unbearable. The family WhatsApp group was silenced, Sunday lunches ceased, and phone calls became rare. Distant relatives chose sides. Some silently supported Carla, others repeated Pedro's words about ingratitude. The isolation was total. Even so, Carla maintained her composure. She went to work, took care of her parents, and avoided talking about the subject. At night, she lay in the dark and relived every memory of her childhood with Pedro, the boy who had promised to protect her, the same one who now called her his enemy. It was impossible not to wonder, at what point did the love get lost? One early morning, while looking at her cell phone, she saw a short message from her mother. "My father's condition worsened. The doctor said it's due to stress." Carla felt her heart sink. She rushed to the hospital. She saw her father frail, breathing with difficulty, and an overwhelming guilt consumed her. She wondered if she was doing the right thing, if seeking justice was worth the risk of destroying what little remained of her family. But when she looked at her brother, who didn't even show up, she understood that what was at stake was greater than forgiveness. It was her parents' future and the peace they still deserved.
The decision matured slowly, like a wound that won't heal. Carla spent weeks trying to find another way out.
another path that didn't involve a definitive break. But every attempt to talk to Pedro ended in manipulation, guilt, or empty promises. The patience she had cultivated her whole life had run out. One night, lying next to her silent cell phone, she thought, "If I remain silent, he will do it again." The next day, she sought out a lawyer. She sat in the cold office and told him everything, from the beginning. The lawyer listened silently, taking notes. When she finished, he took a deep breath. "It's a difficult situation, but what he did is misappropriation. You have every right to sue him." Carla felt the weight of those words. Suing a brother was more than a legal act. It was a symbolic break with the idea that family forgives everything. As she left the office, the wind blew hard, ruffling her hair. She looked at the sky and thought of her mother, her father, and even Pedro, trying to convince herself that this wasn't revenge, but protection. She went home and sorted through documents, bank statements, old messages. Each saved file was a stab in the back, but also a relief. For the first time, she felt she was acting out of love, a mature, firm love that knew how to say enough. In the following days, the tension grew. Pedro noticed her distance and tried to contact her. "Carla, we need to talk. I'm sorting things out, I swear." She replied only, "We don't need to talk anymore. Now it's up to the justice system." His voice wavered on the other end of the line. "Are you going to sue me?" "I'm going to protect our parents." And he hung up. That night, she cried alone, silently. Not for what she had lost, but for what she was about to lose. Her brother, her parents' support, perhaps even the love of her family. But there was a strange peace in her heart, the certainty of doing what was right, even if no one understood. Pedro received the summons a week later. He called immediately, furious. "Have you gone mad? Are you going to expose our family over money?" Carla took a deep breath before answering. "It's not about money, Pedro. It's about respect. You need to learn that your choices have consequences." He laughed nervously, trying to maintain control. "You always thought you were superior, didn't you? Now you're going to play the moral judge." But his voice trembled, and she realized that deep down he knew he had crossed the line. Soon the news spread among the relatives. The reactions were an even more painful blow than the trial itself. "How could you do this to your brother?" some said. "You're going to kill your parents with grief," shouted an aunt. Carla tried to explain, but no one wanted to listen. The label of the cold daughter stuck to her like a scar. The parents reacted in different ways. The father remained silent, avoiding eye contact with her. The mother cried every night, begging them not to take this any further. Carla felt alone, isolated, but she didn't back down. She had crossed the point of no return, and now all that remained was to go all the way to the end.
The following weeks brought to light truths that everyone preferred to keep buried. During the process, Carla's lawyer presented documents she didn't expect to find: parallel bank statements, old transfers, and even receipts for personal expenses made with the fund's money. There were credit card payments, hotel stays, expensive dinners, all financed by what should have guaranteed her parents' health. Carla read every detail, her hands trembling. Pedro hadn't just lied, he turned the fund into a personal safe, maintaining a life of appearances. The shock left her breathless. "He destroyed everything, even the trust," she whispered. The lawyer simply replied, "Now you understand why this needed to come to light." When the evidence was presented to the judge, the tone of the proceedings changed. Pedro tried to justify himself, saying that he mixed up accounts and that he had no bad intentions, but the evidence spoke for itself. In the courtroom, the silence was heavy, as if everyone realized that the real trial was not just legal, it was moral. News of the evidence leaked among relatives. Conversations behind the scenes changed tone. Some began to look at Pedro with suspicion. Others fell silent, ashamed for having defended him. The devastated mother didn't leave the house for days. The father, still recovering, called Carla into her room. "Daughter,
I didn't want to believe it, but you were right. Your brother lied to all of us." The words came out with difficulty, but the acknowledgement was the relief she didn't know she needed. Pedro, for his part, disappeared for a while. No contact, no explanation, just the emptiness of someone caught in their own deception. Carla remained steadfast, but now the weight wasn't just that of the struggle, it was that of the loss. She had obtained the truth, but that truth came at a high price, the destruction of something that would never be whole again. That night, alone, she looked at her bank statement and saw that the balance, now frozen by the courts, remained untouched. For the first time in months, she felt safe, not because of the money, but because of the certainty that, even devastated, she had done what was right. Still, a question echoed in her mind. When justice is won at the cost of love, what is truly gained? The day of the trial dawned gray, with low clouds covering the sky, as if even the weather refused to witness that moment. Carla awoke before sunrise, dressed calmly, and walked to the mirror. The reflection showed deep, dark circles under her eyes and an expression that mixed tiredness and firmness. "Today, it ends," she murmured to herself. In the courtroom, the corridor smelled of stale coffee and tension. She sat down, her trembling hands resting on her lap, as Pedro arrived, escorted by his lawyer, his gaze filled with challenge and fear. When the judge entered, silence fell. The voices sounded distant, formal, but each word felt like a blade. Pedro's lawyer tried to portray Carla as a resentful woman, driven by bitterness and a need for control. She listened in silence until the judge gave her the floor. He stood up, took a deep breath, and said in a firm voice, "I don't want the money back. I want to ensure that my parents are never again held hostage by the irresponsibility of those who should be protecting them."
On a rainy night, she drove aimlessly. She stopped by a bridge and watched the lights reflected in the water. She thought about what she had gained and what she had lost. Justice gave me back my money, but took away what I loved most, she thought. She cried alone for long minutes, letting the rain wash everything away, the pride, the pain, the guilt. Upon returning home, she found her father awake, sitting in the living room. He simply said, "You did what I should have done." And in that instant, she realized that despite the ruin, there was a seed of reconstruction there. Something small, but true. Perhaps love, even wounded, could still be reborn from the ashes of truth. Months passed, and life settled down again. Not as before, but in a new way, more sober, more silent. Carla continued caring for her parents, now with a more attentive, less naive eye. The emergency fund had been reinstated, and the resources were safe in a name. Still, nothing she did seemed to fill the void left by Pedro. There were nights when she found herself looking at old photos, the two of them as children, smiling, covered in dirt, inseparable. One day while they were having coffee, her father asked her to accompany him to the veranda. The afternoon sun gilded the yard. He held her hand with a slight tremor. "Daughter, it took me a while to understand, but now I do. You didn't do this for money. You did it for us." Carla tried to hold back tears, but the lump in her throat dissolved. "I just wanted you to be safe, Dad, and for Pedro to learn." He sighed. "Pedro has always been impulsive, but his love for us is real, just confused. And you had courage, the courage I didn't have." Those words were a balm. For the first time in a long time, Carla felt the weight in her chest lessen. Her father's forgiveness didn't erase the past, but it brought meaning to what had previously been only pain. Days later, an unexpected call. It was Pedro. His voice sounded different, tired, lacking his usual self-affirming tone. "Sis, I I'm trying to start over. I lost almost everything, but I want to change. I know I don't deserve it, but I wanted to see you." Carla's heart tightened. For a few seconds, she considered refusing, but something inside her, perhaps the same love that made her fight, answered, "Come, they miss you." That night, she told her parents. Her father nodded silently. Her mother cried. "That's what family is, daughter. We fight, we get lost, but in the end, we find each other." Carla smiled slightly. She didn't know what to expect from this reunion, but she knew that, finally, love and justice could coexist. Not as before, but in a more honest, more human way. The reunion took place on a sunny Sunday, with the smell of coffee and cake in the air. Pedro arrived simply dressed, without his imported car, without his expensive watch, without his salesman's smile. He carried a small bouquet of flowers for his mother and an expression of someone carrying his own regret on his shoulders. When he entered the room, he stood still for a few seconds, observing his parents and Carla. No one said anything. It was his mother who broke the silence, embracing him with tears in her eyes. "You took your time, my son," she said. Pedro replied softly, "I had to get lost to understand the way back."
The entire room fell silent. Pedro lowered his eyes. For the first time, his charm and self-confidence had vanished. The judge asked for the evidence. The bank statements, the messages, the records, and everything was confirmed. Every number, every withdrawal, every lie. The truth was there, naked, impossible to disguise. When the judge read the sentence, the sound of the official stamp sounded like a period at the end of their story. Pedro would be obliged to return the full amount and would lose the right to manage any family assets. Carla remained motionless, feeling a bitter mix of victory and grief. Pedro, in silence, looked at her with an expression that mixed anger and sadness. After the hearing, Carla walked out of the courthouse under a sky that was finally beginning to clear. A fine drizzle fell, washing the ground, and, in a way, also her pain. The lawyer said goodbye with a wave. "You did the right thing," he said. But she knew that the right thing didn't come without scars. She went home in silence, turned on her phone, and saw dozens of messages, criticisms, gossip, judgments. None of them mattered anymore. That night, her father called her. His voice was trembling but sincere. "Carla, the judge may have given the sentence, but the real judgment is ours, and I want to tell you, I'm proud of you." She cried uncontrollably. For the first time, she felt not just like a daughter who had struggled, but like a woman who had learned to love with courage. Peter disappeared for weeks. No phone calls, no messages, nothing. His mother tried to hide her worry, but Carla could see his lost gaze in the windows. His father, recovering, remained silent, his tired eyes behind his glasses. The emptiness left by their absent son was almost physical, a silence that spread through the rooms. Carla tried to maintain her routine. She went to work, took care of the bills, took her parents to their appointments. But each practical gesture hid a whirlwind of feelings: guilt, anger, longing, exhaustion. Sometimes she wondered if it would have been better to simply leave everything as it was. Maybe it would have been easier to continue living the lie, she thought while looking at Pedro's empty room in his parents' house. One afternoon, a letter arrived. No return address. She recognized the handwriting immediately. She opened it with trembling hands. "You won, Carla, but know that I never meant to hurt you. I only tried to help in my own way. I'm sorry for everything. Pedro." The words were short,
without grand excuses, without promises. For the first time, he wasn't trying to justify himself, and perhaps that's why the letter shook her more than any insult. The following days were filled with silence. The case was over, the money had been returned, but what truly mattered, trust, had died. Mom fell ill, weakened by stress. Dad aged years in months. And Carla, even with reason on her side, felt emptier than ever.
Carla watched from afar, her heart in conflict. Part of her wanted to comfort him, another part still ached. When he approached, she stood still. "I didn't come to apologize, Carla. I came to take responsibility for what I did." She stared at him for a long moment and finally said, "Taking responsibility is the first step. The second is not repeating it." He nodded. "I know." During lunch, the conversations were timid, punctuated by pauses and memories. Gradually, old laughs began to escape, and for a brief moment, it seemed that the family had found a glimmer of light amidst the chaos. In the following months, Pedro began working on something simple, far from the promises of easy profit. Carla, still cautious, watched from afar, hoping that the change would be real. The parents, now more relaxed, smiled naturally again. One night, while putting away papers, Carla found the first receipt for the emergency fund, the one they had created together. She held the yellowed paper and smiled melancholically. Life really is a risky investment, she thought. Then she folded the paper and put it away again, not as a reminder of pain, but as proof that love, even wounded, can survive the truth. Time passed, and with it, the parents' house regained its tranquility. The mornings were no longer silent. The radio played old tunes, and the smell of coffee filled the air once more. Carla continued with her routine: work, visits to her parents, small domestic joys. Pedro, now more humble, visited them frequently, always with discreet gestures of someone trying to rebuild what was broken. One late autumn afternoon, Carla arrived at her parents' house and found Pedro sitting alone on the porch, gazing at the backyard. The sun was setting slowly, painting the sky orange and gold. For a moment, she saw him as he used to be, the playful, dreamy brother who believed everything would be all right. "May I sit down?" she asked. He simply nodded with a shy smile. The silence stretched for a few minutes, comfortable and heavy at the same time. Then Pedro took a deep breath. "I thought I'd never be able to face you again, and honestly, maybe I don't even deserve it." Carla looked at the horizon. "You were right about one thing, Pedro. Family is an investment, but not a money investment. It's a responsibility investment. And when someone doesn't take care of that, everyone loses." Pedro lowered his head. "I lost everything, Carla, but what hurt the most was losing you. I thought I could fix it, but I only created debts. With you, with them, with myself." His voice faltered. For the first time, there was no arrogance or excuses, just a broken man. Carla took a deep breath. The words came softly but firmly. "Pedro, I don't hate you. I never hated you. I just couldn't keep pretending everything was okay. Forgiveness isn't about forgetting. It's about moving on without carrying the weight."
Pedro wept silently. She placed a hand on his, and in that simple gesture, what was shattered began, timidly, to come together. No grand words, no promises, just two siblings, side by side, trying to start over without illusions. As night fell, Carla said goodbye to her parents and walked to the car. Before getting in, she looked back. She saw Pedro helping his father close the window, while his mother smiled from the kitchen. For the first time in a long time, she felt peace. It wasn't the perfect ending, but it was the possible ending, and perhaps the truest one. As he drove back home, he thought, sometimes loving means confronting, and sometimes forgiving simply means understanding that the other person never knew how to love in the same way. The wind drifted in through the window, softly, and she smiled. Justice had brought pain, but also clarity. And in that clarity, finally, there was rest. Protecting your family doesn't always mean forgiving. Sometimes it means having the courage to say, enough is enough. If this story made you reflect on love, boundaries, and courage, subscribe to the channel now. Here, each story shows you that true love also means knowing when to defend yourself. Because family isn't about hiding mistakes, it's about having the strength to start over.
He looked up, his eyes welling up with tears. "So, you forgive me?" She smiled slightly. "I forgive you, but not to relieve you, to free myself."